If you think you can handle the truth buried in these walls, go ahead and hit subscribe, but don't say I didn't warn you. The sirens tore through the night like razor blades, slicing the stale air over New York City's East River. Patrol boats surged toward the faint lights flickering near the shore, their hulls smashing through the black water. Something, or someone, was drifting out from the direction of Rikers Island. At first, it looked like debris, a piece of wood, a bag, maybe garbage tossed by a transport barge. But when Officer Marcela Reyes leaned over the railing of Rescue Vessel 14, her flashlight caught skin. A hand, bloated, pale, motionless. "Stop the boat," she shouted. The engine throttled down, and the water settled into a nauseating calm. Marcela's beam locked onto the floating shape, a man, face down, wearing the unmistakable tin uniform of a detainee. He was tangled in a torn bedsheet, twisted so tightly around his torso, it looked like someone had used it as a restraint, or a weapon. The officers hooked the body and pulled it aboard. As they rolled him over, everyone froze. The man's lips were stained a sickly gray, crusted with dried vomit. His cheeks were hollow, as if he hadn't eaten for days. And carved into the sheet, drawn in something reddish-brown, were the words, "He wouldn't eat." Marcela inhaled sharply. What the hell does that mean? Suicide? Force feeding gone wrong. But then her partner shook his head. Look at his wrists. Beneath the fabric, raw ligature marks circled both arms. Someone had tied him down. Hard, Marcela whispered. This wasn't suicide. They radioed it in. Dispatch's response was shaky. Confirm the ID. Is it inmate Samuel Decker? Marcela checked the swollen face. Even distorted by water and death, she recognized him. Yeah, it was Decker all right. The same inmate who, for days earlier, had been reported missing inside Rikers Island. A disappearance the Department of Correction had brushed off as a clerical error. But clerical errors don't end up floating in the East River. And nothing about the body made sense. Not the timing, not the condition, not the message scrawled across the sheet. Most disturbing of all, Samuel Decker was awaiting trial for a crime that already made national news. He was a key suspect in the disappearance of corrections officer, Officer Raymond Clive, who had vanished from the facility 2 weeks earlier. Now, the only person who might have known what happened was dead. Rikers Island is known for many things: overcrowding, violence, broken systems. But it's not known for inmates simply vanishing from lock units. A detainee goes missing, then a corrections officer. The island goes quiet. Rumors start brewing. Whispers spread. About food, about hunger, about prisoners refusing meals not out of protest, but out of fear. Marcela had heard fragments of the rumors already. Something wrong with the trays. Something rotten. Not the food itself, but what was happening around it. Inmates passing plates untouched. Others trading everything they owned for commissary crackers or even toothpaste just to avoid eating the hot meals. No one said why. No one dared. 2 hours later, Marcela stood inside the fluorescent-lit morgue beneath Bellevue Hospital, staring at Decker's body as the medical examiner began the autopsy. "Time of death?" she asked. "Approximately 24-36 hours ago," the examiner replied. Marcela frowned. He disappeared 4 days ago. Then, wherever he wasn't dead yet. The examiner pulled back the sheet to inspect the stomach area. His eyebrows rose. He hadn't eaten at least 3 days before death. Stomach almost completely empty. Severe dehydration. Electrolyte crash likely contributed to cardiac arrest. So he starved? Marcela asked. No, not exactly. The examiner pointed to the bruising. Someone force-fed him. Badly. Could have aspirated. See this abrasion pattern? Someone used a solid object, maybe a utensil, to pry his mouth open. Marcela stiffened. Why force-feed someone? The examiner looked at her with a chilling calm. To keep them alive long enough for something else. A cold wave rolled down her spine. What about the marks on his wrist? She asked. Bindings. 4 days at a time. Look at the skin breakdown. He wasn't just restrained. He fought. Marcela clenched her jaw. Fought who? The examiner didn't answer. He didn't have to. Less than 12 hours after Decker's body surfaced, Marcella was ferried to Rikers Island herself, officially as part of a joint task review. Unofficially, she was there because NYPD didn't trust the DOC to give them the truth. The sun had risen by the time her boat reached the island's rusted piers. The smell hit her first, a mix of oil, sewage, and industrial decay. Then the sound, metal gates clanging, distant shouts, guards barking orders. Inside the main facility, Warden Jordan Hale waited for her. He was tall, grim-faced, wearing a crisp uniform and an expression that said he didn't want outside eyes involved. "Detective Reyes," he greeted, shaking her hand without smiling. "Tough situation. We'll help however we can." Marcella noticed two things immediately. His uniform collar was crooked, a sign of a man who had dressed too quickly. His hand trembled slightly, a sign of a man hiding something. "I need to see where Decker was last infirmed alive," she said. Warden Hale nodded reluctantly. Protective Custody Unit. He was being held apart because of sensitive accusations. He meant the disappearance of Officer Raymond Clive. But the way Hale said it twisted her gut. They walked down a long corridor lined with reinforced mesh windows. Every few seconds, the muffled echoes of arguments or metal banging disturbed the stale silence. But as they entered the protective custody block, something changed. The noise died. Every inmate in the unit was silent, watching, eyes hollow, weak. Some held their stomachs. Others stared at untouched trays of food sitting on the floor of their cells. Entire trays, rice, beans, meat patties, going cold and untouched. Marcella leaned toward a guard. "Why aren't they eating?" The guard looked away. "You should ask the warden." She did. "What's going on?" "It's just paranoia," Hale replied quickly. Too quickly. Rumors. Inmate gossip. They get bored. They start imagining contamination, poisoning, conspiracies. Happens all the time. "But why now?" Marcella pressed. Hale didn't answer. Instead, he led her to an empty cell at the end of the row. Cell 2, PC. Samuel Decker's cell. Except the moment Marcella stepped inside, she knew something was off. The bunk mattress was stripped. The walls were smeared with faint stains. Food? No, something else. And in the corner, half hidden under a pile of newspapers, was a food tray, still full. The meat patty was hardened, curled at the edges, untouched. The beans had dried into a brown crust. The cornbread was still sealed in plastic. Marcella knelt down and pulled the tray closer. On the underside, scratched faintly into the metal, were jagged letters. "Don't eat." She looked back at Hale. "Who cleans this unit?" "Trustees. Low-risk inmates. They rotate." "So how did this tray stay under papers?" Hale's jaw tensed. "Detective, this is a jail. Things it overlooked. You can't expect." "I can expect," Marcella snapped. "When a detainee disappears, someone notices. When a corrections officer disappears, someone definitely notices. And when inmates across protective custody stop eating altogether." She stopped. A man 2 cells down was staring at her. Staring hard. His skin sunken, lips cracked, hands trembling. She stepped closer. "You okay?" The inmate swallowed painfully. "They got him," he whispered. "Who?" He looked side to side, terrified to be overheard. "The ones who bring the food." Marcella felt her chest tighten. "The kitchen staff?" No, not kitchen." His voice broke. "The ones who deliver it." Hale intervened instantly. "Detective, he's mentally unstable. Half the inmates in this unit are. You can't take anything he says at face value." But Marcella wasn't listening to the warden anymore, because the inmate reached the bars, gripped them weakly, and whispered one last thing. "If you eat, you disappear." Back in the administrative wing, Marcella demanded access to surveillance footage from Decker's block. Hale hesitated. "We're still organizing the files. You know how the system is." "Hale, show me the footage." He finally relented, except when the guard pulled up the security feed for Decker's corridor, a sickly green, corrupted file. Unrecoverable message flashed on the screen. Marcella felt her blood run cold. All cameras? All days. The guard nodded nervously. Every feed covering Decker's block between the day he vanished and the day Officer Clive vanished. How convenient, Marcella muttered. Hale's eyes hardened. Detective careful. She turned on him. A corrections officer is missing. A detainee ends up dead in the river. Inmates are starving themselves out of fear. And your cameras magically fail? Hale stepped closer. Too close. If you're accusing my staff of wrongdoing, you're stepping somewhere dangerous. Marcella held his gaze. If the truth is dangerous, then maybe you should be worried. A long, tense silence filled the room. Then Hale's radio crackled. A guard's voice erupted through the static. Warden Hale, emergency and protective custody. We found something behind the kitchen delivery entrance. Marcella felt her pulse spike. Found what? Another voice came through, shaken, almost choking. It's Officer Clive. Hale went pale. Marcella grabbed his arm. Alive? Not sure, the guard answered. But, detective, you need to get down here. Now! Marcella didn't wait. She ran. Down the hall, past the cells, toward the kitchen access door that led behind the protective custody unit. What she found there froze her in place. Officer Raymond Clive, bound, dehydrated, barely conscious, and lying beside a stack of food delivery crates. He had scratches all over his arms, his uniform shredded in his eyes, wild, terrified, locked onto Marcella as she knelt beside him. His lips trembled as he tried to speak. But only one phrase came out. Don't eat the trays. Marcella's heart pounded. Why? What's happening? Who did this to you? Clive lifted a shaking hand and pointed behind her, not at the guards or the cells, but at the kitchen entrance. Marcella turned and saw something she never expected. A digital keypad installed beside the door, new polished high-tech, with a glowing red indicator labeled, Authorized delivery only. She stood up slowly. Warden Hale, she said, voice low. Who has access to this door? The warden hesitated, and for the first time since she arrived, Marcella saw fear in his eyes. I do, he said. Marcella stared at him. And Hale added, one other person. Who? She demanded. Hale swallowed. Officer Clive's partner. Marcella's breath caught. Clive's partner, Officer Darren Woodson, had filed a missing person report on Clive himself and had been the loudest voice insisting Decker escaped intentionally. Clive struggled to speak again. His voice was a broken whisper. Woodson wasn't delivering food. Marcella knelt. Then what was he delivering? Clive looked at her, eyes filled with horror, and whispered, Bodies. Marcella stood frozen. But before she could ask another question, before she could even process the implications, a deafening alarm blasted through the facility. The lights flickered. The cell doors locked. A voice thundered over the PA system. Staff emergency. Officer Woodson missing from post. Then, kitchen access breach detected. Marcella turned sharply toward the keypad door. The indicator light had changed from red to green. Unlocked. Wide open. And from the darkness beyond the door came a sound. A dragging sound. Something heavy, something scraping the floor, and then a voice, low, gravelly, distorted by the echo of the empty kitchen hallway. Detective, you shouldn't have come here. Marcella reached for her weapon, but it was too late, because when that door swung fully open, what she saw inside changed everything. The metal door groaned as it swung open, the light from the corridor spilling into the dim service hallway behind the kitchen. Marcella stepped forward carefully, weapon drawn, heart pounding against her ribs like it wanted out. The temperature dropped noticeably, a damp, refrigerated cold that clung to her clothes and crept under her skin. The hallway was narrow, lined with metal carts and crates stacked to the ceiling. Shadows stretched long across the floor, distorted by the flickering bulb overhead. And from farther inside, deeper, somewhere between the industrial freezers and the loading dock, the dragging sound continued. Something heavy, something unwilling. Marcella's voice cut sharply through the stillness. Officer Woodson, NYPD, show me your hands. The dragging abruptly stopped. She lowered her stance, breath steady, finger on the trigger, then a voice echoed from the darkness, the same gravelly tone that had warned her moments earlier. "You weren't on the list, detective." "List?" Her pulse thudded. "What list?" She stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. The lock clicked into place. Red indicator light. Secured again. The hallway swallowed the sound of distant inmates shouting. Here, everything was insulated. The hum of refrigeration, the drip of condensation, the low groan of machinery. A perfect place for something or someone to vanish. Marcella moved forward one cautious step at a time. Her flashlight danced over stainless steel surfaces, catching slick patches of moisture and deep scratches in the concrete. Halfway down the corridor, she froze. There were tracks on the floor, 2 deep grooves carved by something dragged repeatedly over the same path. They led toward a heavy freezer door marked with a yellow safety sticker. Authorized storage only. But the grooves didn't end there. They went into the freezer. Marcella steadied her breathing and grabbed the handle. She pulled. The freezer door opened with a violent hiss of escaping cold. And inside, her beam illuminated something that turned her stomach. Dozens of plastic storage tubs lined the back wall, each labeled with supply codes, meal dates, and inventory tags. But one tub was different. It wasn't labeled. It was bigger, and its lid was strapped down with zip ties. A drop of something dark ran down its side and froze halfway, glinting like a black tear. Marcella swallowed hard. "Woodson," she called. "Come out now." But the answer didn't come from the shadows. It came from behind her. A voice, hoarse, trembling, whispered near her ear. "Detective, don't open it." She spun, gun raised. Officer Raymond Clive was standing in the doorway of the corridor, leaning heavily against the frame, his legs shaking from dehydration and captivity. He had somehow followed her, dragging his battered body all the way from where they'd found him. Marcella rushed to him. "Clive, you need medical." "No," he rasped, grabbing her sleeve. "Not yet. Not until I tell you." "Tell me what?" Clive glanced around the freezer, as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. Then he whispered, "Woodson isn't alone." Marcella stiffened. "Meaning what?" Clive coughed, breath sharp. He didn't do this on his own. He couldn't. The deliveries, the disappearances, the trays, they were letting him in, covering for him, signing his access logs, hiding the gaps. "Who?" Marcella demanded. Clive shook his head. "I never saw them, but I heard them. Heard voices. Talking. Planning. They kept me in some back room feeding me scraps. Just to keep me alive." He swallowed shakily. "I think Decker saw something. That's why they took him. That's why he stopped eating." Marcella felt the cold close around her. "Why the food?" she asked. "What's wrong with the trays?" Clive looked at her. Horror etched into every gaunt line of his face. They weren't feeding poison. A beat of silence. They were feeding information. Marcella frowned. "That doesn't make sense." Clive opened his mouth, but he never got the chance to explain, because from inside the freezer, something moved. Something sharp clanged against metal. A tub shifted. A muffled grunt echoed from somewhere deep behind the stack supplies. Clive went pale. "He's here." Marcella raised her weapon and stepped inside, flashlight leading the way. She swept each corner, each shadow. Nothing. Then a hand shot out from between 2 crates, grabbing the edge of a shelf and pulling a figure into view. Officer Darren Woodson. But he didn't look like the composed, respected officer she'd seen in personnel photos. His face was gaunt, eyes wild, beard patchy and unkempt. His uniform was soaked with sweat, sleeves rolled to the elbow, gloves on his hands, thick, industrial gloves, the kind used for handling biohazards. Marcella steadied her aim. "Woodson. Hands where I can see them." Woodson smirked. "Detective Reyes. Always 2 steps behind." "Step out," she ordered. Woodson didn't move. "I wouldn't point that gun if I were you." "Why is that?" He tilted his head. "Because if you fire, this whole room goes into full lockdown. Door seals automatically. You'll suffocate long before anyone opens it." Marcella's grip tightened. Clive wavered against the doorframe, struggling to stay conscious. Woodson stepped fully into the light, raising his gloved hands in a casual, mocking gesture. You think you understand what's going on here. You don't. Nobody does, not even Clive. He was always too righteous to be part of something bigger. Clive growled weakly. You betrayed us. No, Woodson hissed. I survived. The tension thickened, freezing in the cold air. Marcella finally spoke. Tell me about the food. Woodson laughed. A sharp, cracked sound had echoed off steel walls. You think this is about lunch trays? About what prisoners eat. Oh, detective, this is so much bigger. You don't get it, do you? Rikers isn't failing. It's transforming. Into what? Woodson tapped the side of his head. Information exchange. Leverage. Pressure points. Every inmate in this place has secrets. Crimes, connections, networks. You want answers? You get inside them. Their bodies. Their routines. Their vulnerabilities. He leaned forward, eyes shining with feverish intensity. You control what they eat. You control what they reveal. Marcella felt nausea rising. You were starving them to make them talk. Starve? No, no. He waved a hand. Starvation breaks them too fast. We needed them weak, not dead. Weak men beg for deals. Weak men confess. Weak men say anything. This is torture, Marcella whispered. This is strategy, Woodson countered. Who is we? She demanded. Woodson smiled, slow and sinister. You really think a correction officer could pull this off alone? His voice dropped to a chilling whisper. I wasn't delivering bodies. I was delivering messages. To who? Woodson stepped forward. To anyone who paid. Gang leaders, drug suppliers, lawyers, even cops. Information is the only currency that matters in here. People will pay anything, to make an inmate break. Clive's breathing grew shallow. You monster. Woodson ignored him. They wanted Decker, he continued. Wanted to know if Clive here had found something he shouldn't have. But Decker wouldn't talk, wouldn't break. So I gave him encouragement. Marcella's voice was ice cold. You killed him. Woodson shook his head. He killed himself. Stopped eating. Stopped drinking. Try managing a man who refuses to stay alive long enough to be useful. What about Clive? Marcella asked. Clive listened. Clive learned. But Clive didn't cooperate. So we put him aside. He would have died eventually. Marcella grew still. We, she repeated. Who else is involved? Woodson's expression hardened, and that was the moment he lunged. He didn't go for Marcella. He went for the tub, the unmarked one with the zip ties. Marcella fired a warning shot at the ceiling, a deafening crack, as the freezer alarms instantly screeched. Warning lights flashed red. Woodson grabbed the tub, yanking at the ties. Marcella rushed him, slamming into his side. They collided with a metal shelf, tubs toppling around them. Cold packs burst. Frozen vegetables skittered across the floor. The unmarked tub slid, crashing into the far corner. Woodson elbowed her hard. She went down. He scrambled for the tub again. You want to know what's inside? Go ahead. Open it. Clive staggered into the room, voice trembling. Don't. But Marcella was already moving. She crawled across the icy floor and reached the tub first, hands shaking as she ripped the zip ties with her knife. Woodson laughed, breathless, manic. Go on, detective. Open it. See the truth. Marcella lifted the lid and froze. Inside the tub was food. Hundreds of sealed containers. Hot trays. Cold trays. Portions of meat, vegetables, grains. All neatly packed, labeled, coded. Every tray identical to the ones inmates refused to eat. But one thing made them horrifying. The trays weren't spoiled. They weren't contaminated. They were recorded. Each one had a tiny, nearly invisible microrecorder embedded in the lid seam, the kind used in interrogation rooms. Marcella's breath stopped. Woodson stepped closer, voice low. Every bite they took, every word they muttered while eating, recorded, logged, sold. Information gathered at their weakest moment. Clive looked sick. You were spying on them? Listening while they slept? While they were alone? Oh, yes, Woodson said proudly. Weak men confess in the dark. Weak men whisper to their food. And we heard it all. Marcella stared at the dozens of trays. Each one was a wiretap, a portable interrogation room, a method of extracting information without inmates even knowing. No poison, no toxins, no biological harm, only psychological. Manipulation through hunger and deprivation. Woodson lifted his chin. The perfect system, detective, until you arrive. Marcella drew her weapon again. It's over, Woodson. Woodson stared at her, then something changed his eyes. He smiled, slowly, menacingly. You think this ends with me? Marcella's heartbeat stumbled. Who else? She demanded. Woodson stepped backward into the shadows of the freezer. You'll meet them soon enough. Stop. He raised his hands, and then slammed them onto the emergency panel behind him. A blast of freezing air surged. The freezer door swung shut. A steel bolt slid into place. And the last thing Marcella heard before darkness swallowed her was Woodson's final whisper. You're on the list now. The darkness inside the freezer swallowed Marcella whole. The door slammed shut with a metallic bang, echoing through the chamber as the locking bolt slid into place. The temperature plunged instantly, the kind of cold that steals air from your lungs. For a moment, all she heard was the hum of the refrigeration units and her own quickening breath. She lunged to the door, slamming her shoulder into it. Woodson, open the door. No answer. She tried again, useless. The door was reinforced steel, sealed electronically. From the outside, Marcella turned, squinting through the dim emergency lights that glowed like dying embers overhead. Clive was slumped against a shelf, shivering violently. His lips had gone blue. We need to get out, he rasped. We will, she said, forcing calm she didn't feel. Stay with me. Her mind raced. Time was ticking literally. Freezers like this hit lethal temperatures fast. 15, 20 minutes tops before hypothermia became irreversible for someone already as weak as Clive. She scanned the walls. The alarm Woodson triggered had disabled the normal override. But there had to be something, a fail-safe, a breaker panel. There, a small maintenance panel near the ceiling, half covered by frost. Too high to reach. Marcella grabbed a stack of supply crates, dragging them beneath it, hands burning from cold. She climbed, boots slipping against the icy plastic. She pried the panel open with her multi-tool. A cluster of wires lay inside, stiff from freezing air. Red, black, green, and a yellow wire marked emergency release. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. Behind her, Clive collapsed fully onto the floor. Marcella, hurry. I'm trying, she muttered. She gripped the wire and paused. Cutting the wrong one could seal the room permanently. The right one might save them. The wrong one could kill them. She took a sharp breath. Please work, she whispered. She yanked the yellow wire. A sudden click ripped through the silence. Marcella jumped down, raced to the door, pressed the handle, and the bolt slid open. She threw her weight against the steel door. It opened. Freezing air poured out in a white cloud as she dragged Clive into the corridor. He gasped, sucking in warm air, his limbs twitching under the shock of temperature change. Marcella dropped to her knees beside him. Clive, Ray, stay awake. Stay with me. But his eyes were rolling, drifting. He was fading. And somewhere in the facility, alarms were blaring. Not the freezer alarm, the full facility alarm. Doors were locking, guards shouting, radios crackling. Something was happening outside this hallway. Something big. Marcella stood, gun drawn, forcing herself to focus despite the ice still clinging to her clothes. Woodson had escaped deeper into the facility. But where? There were a dozen routes, service tunnels, old utility corridors, abandoned rooms no one used anymore. He knew the island better than anyone. But Marcella noticed something on the floor. Footprints. Fresh. In the frost that had fallen off her and Clive. 2 sets. One was hers. The other belonged to Woodson. heavy, hurried prints leading down the corridor toward an old metal door marked Staff Access, Authorized Personnel Only, and beneath it in chipped paint, Kitchen Sublevel Storage. Marcella took a steadying breath. Clive, listen. I have to go after him. Clive's voice was barely a whisper. Don't go alone. Marcella squeezed his shoulder. Backup will find you. Stay alive. Before he could answer, she pushed through the heavy door and descended the narrow staircase into the sublevel, a forgotten underbelly of the facility. The concrete stairwell echoed every step, harsh, repetitive, like distant gunfire. The air grew warmer, thicker, mixed with the scent of metal and damp earth. At the bottom of the stairs, a single bulb flickered over a long corridor lined with rusted storage rooms. And at the end of the hall, a faint light glowed from an open door. Marcella edged forward, keeping her gun raised. As she moved, she noticed details she hadn't seen in the upper floors. Scratches along the walls, footprints layered over footprints, discarded food trays, dozens of them, scattered to the corridor, each one labeled, each one wired. This was the heart of Woodson's operation, a listening room, a surveillance maze, a place built to extract secrets without ever asking question. Marcella entered the lit room cautiously. It was larger than she expected. Part storage, part workshop, part interrogation chamber. Shelves lined the walls, loaded with recording devices, toolkits, empty trays, stacks of inmate files. And at the center stood a table covered in electronics, blinking lights, monitors, hard drives. All active, all recording. A small monitor flickered with live audio readings. Inmate voices, some crying, some whispering, some begging. Marcella felt her stomach twist. Woodson hadn't just been listening. He'd been collecting, cataloging, selling. A voice echoed from the far corner of the room. You made it farther than I thought. Marcella whirled. Woodson stepped into the light. Sleeves rolled up, gun holstered, hands open. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked disappointed. You ruined everything, he murmured. You tortured people, Marcella snapped. Manipulated them. Starved them. Nearly killed Clive. And you murdered Decker. Woodson scoffed. Decker killed himself. I told you. You did worse, she shot back. You trapped him, broke him, forced him into a corner. Woodson's jaw tightened. He knew something he wasn't supposed to. What? What was he hiding? Woodson stepped closer, the light catching the madness in his eyes. Names. Whose names? Woodson exhaled slowly, as if savoring the moment. People who paid for information. People who wanted leverage. Lawyers, gang leaders, even people in uniform. Marcella's blood went cold. Which officers? Woodson shook his head. Doesn't matter. It matters, she insisted. Woodson pointed to a tall metal cabinet. Files are in there, but you won't live long enough to read them. He reached for his holstered gun. Marcella fired first. Not at him. At the overhead pipe. Hot steam erupted downward, blasting Woodson in the face. He screamed, stumbling backward, hands flying up to shield himself. Marcella lunged, tackling him to the ground. They crashed into a stack of trays, metal clattering everywhere. Woodson swung wildly, catching her jaw with an elbow. She hit the floor hard, but rolled before he could grab his weapon. Woodson reached the cabinet, pulled it open, and grabbed a thick envelope. He held it up as if it were a shield. These names end careers, he snarled. End lives. Nobody walks away from this clean. Marcella spit blood, standing. Put it down. No! Woodson breathed. You put everything down. He drew his gun. Time slowed. Marcella dug behind a supply shelf as Woodson fired. Bullets ripping through cardboard boxes. She returned fire, one shot, striking the metal cabinet beside Woodson's head. He flinched, just long enough. Marcella surged forward, slamming into him. The envelope flew from his hand, scattering papers across the room. They grappled, fists flying, boots scraping, body smashing into shelves. Woodson grabbed a tray, swung it like a blade. It sliced across Marcella's arm, hot pain streaking up her shoulder. She gritted her teeth, pushed through it, and grabbed his wrist, wrenching it sideways. Bone cracked. Woodson howled. His gun clattered to the floor. Marcella kicked it away, sending it skidding across the room. Woodson lunged, grabbing her around the throat, forcing her back against a steel shelf. Her vision blurred. His breath hit her face, hot, angry, desperate. "You ruined everything," he roared. Marcella's fingers scraped the shelf, searching, reaching, finding something. A tray, one of his cursed, wired trays. She swung it upward with everything she had. It crashed into his temple. Woodson staggered and fell, hard, unmoving. Silence filled the room. Only the monitors hummed their ghostly chorus of whispered confession. Marcella dropped the tray, chest heaving, throat burning. She stepped toward Woodson, kicked his gun farther away, and checked his pulse. Alive. Barely. She grabbed the radio on his hip. "This is Detective Marcella Reyes. Officer Woodson is in custody. I repeat, suspect detained. Send emergency medical to lower storage level." Chaos erupted over radio. She ignored it. Instead, she bent down, collecting the scattered papers. The names he tried so desperately to hide. She shoved them into an evidence bag and stepped into the corridor. At the top of the stairs, backup arrived. NYPD, DOC command staff, EMTs. They pushed past her to reach Clive. Marcella climbed the last steps in a fog of exhaustion. As she emerged into the main corridor, the cold air washed over her like a baptism. Clive was alive. Woodson was detained. The files were secured. But as she handed the evidence bag to an officer, she noticed something chilling. The bag was lighter than it should have been. A single envelope was missing. Someone had taken it. And in the distance, a DOC supervisor quietly slipped a folder under his jacket before disappearing into the crowd. Marcella's stomach dropped. Woodson was right. He wasn't alone. Hours later, as dawn crept across the East River, Marcella stood on the pier waiting for the transport boat. The wind whipped her hair, tugging her coat tight around her aching body. Behind her, Rikers Island loomed in silence, a monstrous shape against the pale morning sky. Clive was stable in the hospital. Woodson was unconscious under guard. The operation was shut down, but there were still missing names, missing recordings, missing proof of who else was involved. Marcella stared across the water, heart sinking with the weight of what she now understood. The trays weren't the end. They were the beginning. A system like that doesn't operate without protection, without coordination, without higher authority pulling invisible strings. She whispered to the empty pier. "This isn't over." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Detective Reyes, we know what you found." Another message followed. Seconds later. "You should have stayed out of the kitchen." Marcella's blood ran cold. A final message appeared. "If you think this case was intense, you're not ready for the next one." She stared at the screen. A shiver traced her spine, not from the cold, from the truth. This wasn't the end of the story. Not even close.